Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor, who is once again wearing his orange sweatshirt when reviewing the album by Earl Sweatshirt, Sick. It's the third time I've reviewed Earl Sweatshirt, but it's probably the first time that I am starting to really get what people like about him so much. Now, I've never disliked him. I've just had a hard time figuring out what's there. His delivery is so laid back. I think I've called him a sort of sleepy ghost face in the past, where he has a relentless flow, but he almost sounds either drunk or just way too mellow for how many words he's saying per minute, you know? But what I think I've come to understand through this album is really what comes through, is he has a kind of intelligence, a kind of keenness, which is subtle. He's not flexing his intelligence. He's not flexing his wordsmithing. He doesn't come across as somebody who's trying to kind of put you down and be like, you're like this, but I'm like that. And I think that's what people must pick up on. There's a real subtleness to the greatness of Earl Sweatshirt that I'm just starting to pick up. I read on rapgenius.com, I guess it's just genius.com now, he described why he made this album. He said that it was because art needs to reflect life and people were sick, people were angry, isolated, and restless. So that's where he's coming from in this album. He's observing it's kind of a COVID album, kind of a post-COVID, I guess a fake post-COVID album because COVID's not over. But I really like that feel in this album. We do have an isolated and restless feeling all the way throughout the album. In general, I don't like spending a lot of time on biography of artists. If I can, I avoid it entirely. I like to let the art speak for itself. But his parentage is interesting enough and unique enough in hip-hop, in music in general, that it's worth spending a little bit of time studying, you know? I mean, his mom is a real deal academic. In a lot of ways, that makes him like Kanye, right? Don't you ever leave that doctor off of Donda West. She was the chair of a humanities department in a small public college, much like the host of this professor, who is the chair of a humanities department in a small public college. But Earl Sweatshirt's mom is on a whole nother level. Like, she's not like me, like an academic, but not like, whoa. Earl Sweatshirt's mom is like a real deal critical race theorist. And if you don't know, you've only heard critical race theory in the last couple of years, you don't know what it means. Unless you have a law degree, unless you're studying law at the graduate level, you don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. I've studied it for hours and hours and hours, but I don't know. Am I trying to pass the bar? Never enter into an argument about what critical race theory is or isn't, unless you are a grad student in law school, because you are falling into a trap. You are allowing racists to define anti-racism as something that it's not. So that's just my piece of advice. If anyone ever says, but what do you think about critical race theory? I say, I don't think about it. I think about systematic racism, and I want to debate that with you. Anyways. So that's his mom. And then apparently his dad was the poet laureate of South Africa. So between those two things, you know, like really that's an amazing pedigree. And it's odd because the pressure to succeed growing up from that level of success in art, and it's very difficult to succeed in art, in law and academia, it's very difficult to succeed there. It's interesting that what's come out is not somebody who's constantly flexing and trying to show how great he is, but somebody who I would say is more defined by his coolness, you know, by his just sort of laid backness, his sweatshirtness. Musically, this album's got all these swirling beats, just very swirling beats. There's one line that I'm going to really focus on with this album. It's the opening line to the song Titanic. Give it to you straight, no frills. That really is what he does. Kind of like this sweatshirt, which I have worn every time I've gone to the gym. That's 3 times a week for the past 11 years. It's kind of tattered. It's got holes. I bought it at Costco for $20. I bought it in Costco back when I lived in California. I haven't lived in California since 2010. You know, like that's what this sweatshirt is. It's straight and no frills. But that's what this whole album is. It's straight, no frills. There's no choruses. I guess there's one chorus, but there's no hooks. The guest spots are not flashy. There's no singing. There's no like sing-songy thing. There's like samples, but none of the samples are like super memorable that you'd repeat back to yourselves. They're very good rhymes, interesting themes, but nothing's particularly unified. I go back to the term that I used when I described Feet of Clay, where I just said a single inscrutable note. There's something about Earl Sweatshirt where it's very inscrutable. It's very hard to penetrate and understand what is actually happening here. And I think it might be that I'm just not smart enough to pick it up. Like, or maybe I'm not open enough to what he's doing. You know, I don't know if that ever happens to you. You can tell me in the comments if you've ever had this with an artist where like you just know that there's something that people get out of it that you're not getting out of it. But I like it. You know, I'm not saying like this is bad. Now it's not for me. It is for me. But there's some degree to it that I can't quite access. It's an interesting thing that happens in music. I guess in all art, but especially in music. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to that song, Titanic. That's going to be my stamp of the album. I'll include a link to it up there. That's my homework. If you want to know what Earl Sweatshirt Sick is all about, this is an example of the music. The beat winds up in the beginning until it becomes this backwards sounding beat. So much of this album is backwards. So much of the production is backwards. These kind of haunted synthesizers. A very cool, complicated drum beat that's going on here. This is produced by someone named Black Noise, or Black Noy, money sign, who produces most of this album. He's quite a good producer. Again, straight no frills, which is the opening line of the song. Give it to you straight, no frills. As a matter of fact, I don't even always know how to approach Earl Sweatshirt's lyricism. So I'm going to, for each song, give you his opening line, because that's usually a good indicator of the kind of lyricist he is. Give it to you straight, no frills, what I think might pay the bills. What I think might pay the bills. Might. So he's not some rapper sitting out here being like, I got money, I got cash, I got all this, and I can, I got the skills to pay the bills. It's more like what I think, what comes out of his artistic process might pay the bills. Hip-hop does not have a lot of might. I mean, it has might, like strength, but might as like conditional sentences, it doesn't have a lot of. So I think that's part of the strength of Earl Sweatshirt as well, somebody who's comfortable with saying something might be. He quotes Tupac, and he actually has a sample, I believe, of Tupac spitting at the camera. Just straight rhyming, no chorus, a cool kind of background voice in the back. This has maybe the catchiest of the flow, where there's an emphasizing at the end of the line. I'll give you just one of the verses in here where you can hear his play of his use of vocabulary. He uses lots of interesting words like apparition. Meanwhile, with kind of like standard hip-hop and basketball references, and just this emphasis of this one rhyme that he keeps going back to. No assist, I'm out here on a mission, triple doubling off the strips, get ghost like I need a killer, get ghost like an apparition, hometown, hold me down like a rock, so you know how I'm going to skip it, just so you know how we livin'. So you know just how we livin'. Live in, apparition, strips, mission. He's not always rhyming 100% of the time, but it's that cool kind of, I just go back to it, the sleepy ghost face, the sleepy ghost face flow, where not all the words necessarily mean something, but they have a feeling and they're able to create an atmosphere. Now I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Starts off with the song Old Friend. Swirling keyboards, no drums. This song's by The Alchemist, so I guess it makes sense there's no drums there. And he just starts. And so many, so many rappers will, yo, turn my headphones up. Okay, yeah, all right. I'm going to do this in 2 takes. Okay, yeah, all right, here we go. Turn headphones down. Okay, yeah, okay, all right, check it. Okay, right? I got a little too into that. Sorry. I listen to a lot of hip-hop. I guess I think that a lot in my head. But for the most part, he just starts going. And that's part of what makes this album so unceremonious. This lack of frills. No producer has a tag on here. There's no catchphrases. You know, yeah. Strong spirit where the body couldn't get asylum. The cost of living high. Don't cross the picket line and get the virus. Just that one line. Don't cross the picket line and get the virus is such a COVID time. Strong spirit where the body couldn't get asylum. The cost of living high. There's so much in here that I'm having trouble parsing out what it means. I'm sure it means something, but just the sound of these words together, right? Picket line and get the virus. Very satisfying way that goes together. I'm sorry, that's the fan in my heating system, which I turned off. You're just going to have to excuse the noise. Tell me in the comments if it ruins the entire video for you or if you don't care. I'm very particular about that. But my family is basically a hostage. They have to stay upstairs when I do these videos, so maybe one of them turn the heating back on. Came out of the thicket smiling, Mad Hatter's cap in every line. Just his usage of words like thicket and smiling. Sometimes I like to do this. I call it the Dora the Explorer thing, where I say something and then I ask you to say it at home. I know you might be in an office or you might be sitting next to somebody, but it's a satisfying thing and a satisfying reminder of Earl Sweatshirt's art. Can you say thicket smiling? Good! Thicket smiling. What a great combination of words. Smiling. It ends with the sound of rain, and then the next song starts off, and eventually it's mentioned that there's a rainy day, so there is some continuation between the songs. The song's called 2010, another kind of swirling, half-beat, very strong opening. I'm gonna need a bigger bag for the cohort, trying to make a millionaire out of the Slumdogs, talking about trying to, I don't know much, again, about his career. So if you don't know, I talk with a lot of confidence, but you need to understand how ignorant I am of so many things, and especially anything that happened in music between 2002 and 2018. I don't know anything about. I wasn't paying attention to music, so I missed Odd Future entirely. I missed it. I just missed it. I was doing other stuff. I was having kids. I was getting my doctorate, so you have to call me Dr. Skypain, So I totally missed Odd Future, but it does seem like this album has a lot of discussion about Odd Future or about his place in a crew. And so here he's trying to form his own crew and try to get them money as well. I like how the beat breathes a little bit at the end. And then we have the cleverest line in the album, 5-0 on me like the Olympics. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee for the 5-0 on me like Olympics. Just think about it for a bit. 5-0 on me like the Olympics. Get it? Because there's 5 rings in the Olympic symbol. So 5-0, 5-0, 5-0, like the Olympics. How has no one thought of that before? It's just great. Next song, Sick, is weird. It's a backwards drum beat that reminds me a lot of Beastie Boys' Paul Revere, coming right off of Easy by The Game and Kanye West, which I recently reviewed yesterday. So it's odd there. He starts off the song with one of the most important lines on the album. And this is something which... So, Something Gotta Give was... First, it was the name of Marilyn Monroe's last movie. I mean, she made another movie called Misfits, but she died on the set. I believe I'm correct. You can correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Or Something Gotta Give is the movie that she was filming when she died. Either way, it was one of her final things. And it's an amazing title because in her life, something had to give because she was like addicted and depressed and all over the place and eaten up by the media. And so like there's this real power in this term. It's supposed to be a comedy, but something's gotta give. But something's gotta give is an amazing concept. Just the sense that you have in your life or in society or in the world that something has to give. And that's kind of the moment that we've been in for the past 2 years with COVID, or the last 5 years with the Trump era, or the last 11 years with the internet era, or whatever, however long it's been, This sense like something's got to give. Something's got to happen. There's too much pressure. There's too much stuff building. Maybe COVID was the thing that gave. I don't know. But I really like this opening line because then he gets nerdy. He says, "Gotta spin another web, head home, mess with Fisk like I'm Spider-Man." Like he's talking about Wilson Fisk, which is the name of the Kingpin from Spider-Man. Premiered in Amazing Spider-Man number 50. Just like a totally nerdy reference here in the middle of this very interesting album. He sounds kind of drunk on this song or kind of sick. Like sometimes he sounds sharper than other times. I don't know if that's part of his style, if he just has different flows, or if he actually does get drunk and record, or if it's just how I hear things. He then ends it with a Fela Kuti quote about the need for revolutionary music in Africa. And it is kind of a reminder, there is, like African presence in hip hop is something that people just need to be very conscious of. Obviously, hip hop is African American, right? It's a product of the African American experience, right? But the relationship between African American music and culture and African music and culture is fascinating. It's fascinating. I study a lot of French hip hop where the relationship between Africa and hip hop there is much more direct. And here, having somebody who has a very tangible connection to Africa with an African father, it does, I think it does inform things. It does change a little bit the life experiences that are being described in an important way. And we'll get to that in the next song as well. Not the next song, but the song after. Vision is the next song, featuring Zaloopers, who's someone who I liked on the Injury Reserve album as well. Kind of a swirling piano, sort of trap drums on here, which I didn't expect to hear. Again, it sort of feels drunk. It just feels kind of sloppy. It starts off with this discussion of magic, which is a theme on this song and on this album itself too. The difference between magic, between like make-believe and reality. Zalooper, I really like his opening. I really like his deliberate delivery. He has a little bit more charisma, I think, than Earl Sweatshirt. He has a little more frills, which I think is good. I mean, I don't. Okay, so like, I might be denying what makes Earl Sweatshirt great, but I would sort of like, if he could, I don't know, maybe bedazzle the sweatshirt a bit, get some more like guest appearances and more like hooks and stuff to like not overtake what he's doing, but to sort of put what he's doing in relief, like to like make it clear that what he's doing is this very specific thing. But what do I know? I'm just a loser trying not to think about teaching on Friday. So forget me. But this does kind of make me like, oh wow, this is how it sounds to have some interplay with someone else who has a little bit more sort of character in their voice, or more flashy character in his voice. Earl's open is out with the vision. Myself, I had to fend for myself. Maybe not his best line, but I do love the quotes that's happening here at the end, where it's like a magical story about someone asking how to help their black children believe in magic, and it's not about magic. The line is, "The magic of truth is much more powerful than the magic of make-believe." I'm going to say that again, and you know what? I'm going to let you sit with that one too. Another cup of coffee from my merch mug. Frills to pay the bills. The magic of truth is more powerful than the magic of make-believe. Next song, Tabula Rasa, featuring Armand Hammer. I really liked Armand Hammer's album from last year with The Alchemist. A really just savage verse from Elucid, which I finally learned is not Elukid, which is how I said it on my Armand Hammer review. What can I say? My ignorance is profound. He starts off with "off the strength, I'm not as numb as I thought." But just the way he delivers certain lines in this verse, "tears and snot bubbles, sob puddles, I lay in the wet spot," just like, again, I gotta move the camera because the sun is coming in and making the visuals kind of unpleasant. I mean, it's like, all shiny. Just tears and snot bubbles, sob puddles, I lay in the wet spot. Really great cadence and just playing with the sonorities of words. Billy Woods shows up as well. He has this weird sort of verse about like going into a club with a Pepsi bottle with alcohol in it. I'm not quite sure. I do like how Billy Woods makes a very direct reference to where he's from. All cars are foreign and they drive on empty. And then they say Zimbabwe, which is interesting, because his origin is from Zimbabwe, and it's a similar thing I was talking about, that the African American experience is not always the same as the African American experience, right? I mean, Barack and Michelle had a very different experience, just as an example. And frankly, it's weird and racist that we have not thought more about the differences in those experiences. That isn't more of the discussion about the Obama legacy and about the nature of that family. But whatever. There's so many weird and racist things about the reception of the Obamas that we can't. We just have to pick. We have to try to pick our fights and end up losing those too. Earl Sweatshirt is very good here as well. As always, been there and back. Tall tales tossed to the breeze. Just a great verse. And then leads into the next song, Lie. I did want to say one more thing that was kind of wild. Billy Woods mentioned Mobutu Sese Seko, and then Sese Seko was also mentioned in the album I reviewed last week from Quebec. So that's two references to former Zaire's bloody dictator. Just that's, hey, some more African history. It's good to hear it in hip-hop. The song Lie may be my favorite beat on the album. It's these kind of like sweet horns with just a super scratchy sound. He starts off with same one that I forgot to praise still above me. So kind of a somewhat religious sentiment, like he forgot to praise God, but God is still above him. But really what makes this stand out for me is when I see the word lie, I think about when I learned what lie was. I remember, so, when I was, 12, a lot of suburban white kids go through a sort of phase of like social justice and environmental justice and like a sort of, I guess, becoming woke decades before the term woke came about. I didn't quite know what to do with myself. And so my dad told me, you should just read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that's a great piece of advice. If you've never read the autobiography of Malcolm X, you really need to carve out some time to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's a masterpiece book. It is as important of a book about American history as exists. You just can't, like, beyond the fact that it's so important, it is so entertaining and so moving. And I first learned about Lie in a scene that is quoted in this very song, where Malcolm X, when he was still Malcolm Little, living in Boston, working at the Parker Omni House, the same place where they invented the Boston cream donut. It's the same place where Malcolm X worked. It's true. He would have his hair straightened, which was the fashion at the time, by using lye. And the thing about it was, in order to straighten out your hair, you had to put this poison in your hair and it would burn. And he would describe this process. And I remember being 12, 13 years old, and it was like through this bizarre anecdote, I had my first real understanding of the depths of privilege that I experienced. Because obviously I understood that I experienced privilege. I wasn't unaware of racism. But even this, the idea that somebody would put themselves through this to look more like me, that I woke up looking like me. I grew up with this super straight hair, and it's just that way because that's how I was born. And then someone would put himself through this to get to that point. It's an example of why the autobiography of Malcolm X is such a masterpiece, because it's a small detail that says everything about where he was in his life and about where our society was. Is, okay, our society is not as much as it was back then, but it is way more than people would like to acknowledge. So instead of acknowledging that systematic racism, they just pretend to know what critical race theory is, which they don't. Neither do I. I know one person who knows what it is. That's Earl Sweatshirt's mom. Next song is called Lobby, kind of a cool, weird interlude. It seems like it's a story about like getting in, like being attacked, buying drugs or something. I can't quite figure out what it's about, but it's a nice little song, and it ends with someone talking about Mike Trout, the baseball player, stealing third base. And that's pretty wild because Mike Trout is probably the least hip hop athlete of all time. He's just he plays for the Angels, you know. He plays baseball. He's this big meathead looking. I don't know. So it's fun hearing a Mike Trout reference in a hip hop song. Next song's called. Actually, that's not true because Mike Trout's from New Jersey, and there's a lot of great hip hop from New Jersey, you know. So what do I know about Mike Trout? God Laughs. The production here is maybe the most straightforward. It's just these two notes on this organ, kind of going back and forth, and then Earl makes a plea. The same dust can't stay. I gotta clean or I can't think. Now, I understand this might be a metaphor, this dust that he has to clean. You know, I think we could talk about this as the dust of injustice, the dust of racism, the dust of your life, sticking around and not being able to grow past it. But I also think this is part of being, what was the term he used? I gotta look at my notes again. Angry and isolated. When we're angry and isolated in COVID, you need to keep the house clean. I gotta clean or I can't think. And also I like that because, you know, there's not a lot of hip hop songs for fastidious people. I'm not a fastidious person. I'm not a clean person. I can live in absolute filth. Seriously, this sweatshirt is sort of one of the last remnants of the kind of filth that I can live in. Because I try to not wash this. I hide it from my wife, and then she washes it when I'm not looking. You know, my wife, she needs to clean or she can't think. Interesting reference to his grandfather speaking 13 languages. Again, I believe this is true, and this goes back to an African heritage where speaking 13 languages is not as rare as you might think, given the number of tribal languages in a specific geographic area. Next song is Titanic, which I've already described. Then the album ends with Fire in the Hole. Oddly, out of nowhere is a guitar-based loop. I don't hear any other guitar anywhere else on the album. Kind of sultry. It opens with what I think is the only chorus in the entire album. And it's not really a chorus. It's just something that he repeats. Seeping into the mulch, I need a quick result. I read it and don't respond. Remember when I said that Earl Sweatshirt is probably... I'm not smart enough to understand Earl Sweatshirt, or I'm not open enough to what Earl Sweatshirt is saying or doing. Seeping into the mulch, I need a quick result. I don't get it. But I believe that there is something to get. And that's one of the great gifts that underground hip hop can give you, you know? Like there's so many underground hip hop albums where I listen to, I'm just like, wow, that is so deep, I think. That is such a wonderful line, I'm sure. And that's how I feel with this. And that's how I feel with so much of this album. This is definitely the most I've ever enjoyed an Earl Sweatshirt album, but I suspect I'm going to go back to some rap songs. I'm going to go back to Feet of Clay, and I'm going to go, oh, I get it. I just got to get more into that atmosphere, more into that mood. So there you go. There's my review of Earl Sweatshirt and a review of my sweet Timberland orange sweatshirt from Costco. Real lambswool. It's not. Okay, until next time, boy, I think I know what I'm going to review next. And I think it's going to be from my hometown. There's the camera.